or speakers this morning. First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Dana Ennis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Urban Conservancy, which is a New Orleans-based nonprofit that's been developing equitable practices, policies, and programs to strengthen our urban environment and local economy for about 20 years now. And I've been here for about 16 of those years, actually 20 if you count my stint as a volunteer board member, as a founding board member for Stay Local. So our core programs are our Independent Business Alliance Stay Local, which I just mentioned, our Water Civics Summer Camp for kids called Building Active Stewardship in New Orleans, or BASIN for short, and the Front Yard Initiative, which is a program to incentivize homeowners to reduce excessive paving. And as those last two programs indicate, a lot of our work focuses on education about and implementation of sustainable, equitable land use and nature-based stormwater management solutions for New Orleanians. None of this work is possible without the generous support of our funders, including the Albert and Elaine Borchardt Foundation, Wisner Donation Fund, the Greater New Orleans Foundation, Entergy's Environmental Initiatives Fund. Got to give a shout out to our media partner, WWNO, who is having their fund drive this week. So give generously there as well. They're very important to our community. And of course, our many, many individual donors, many of whom are on the call today. So thank you all for helping make things like this presentation and the work we do out in the communities possible. And helping me out this morning are Sam Kamajere, our UC program manager, and our tech associate, Matthew Raschuti. So before we get started, I'd like to run through a couple housekeeping items to keep things running smoothly. First, we have currently over 36 people on the call right now, or we have 36 people on the call right now, over almost 100, about 97 registered. We are recording, so everyone who registered will be able to access that recording. And we're really excited to have so much interest in this topic. Please feel free, as I said, to introduce yourselves in the chat if you like, and we will ask everyone to stay muted for the first portion of the program and encourage you to use the chat box to ask any questions of the presenters you may have. We'll address those questions as we can during the presentation, and then at about 8:45 or so, we'll formally open it up for questions, and you can unmute yourself. But please use that raise hand function in the reactions box tab down at the bottom of your screen so we can call on you. You can also continue to use the chat function if you prefer. We'll monitor and respond to those questions as well. Finally, our stated end time on the flyer was 9 a.m. And yet, if you have to leave us then, like if you have a day job, for example, that you have to get to, we understand, but our speakers have all agreed to stay on until 9:15 and continue to answer any remaining questions. So don't worry if we're coming up on 9 and you still have a burning question that you want to ask. We have time for that. The inspiration for this event are the fascinating conversations I've had over the years with each of the speakers, and it just felt like it was time to bring all of these different threads of equitable infrastructure together and examine how they relate to other. And the high attendance suggests to me that I'm not the only one who feels that way. So if by the end of this presentation, we all feel we have a fuller understanding of what the term equitable infrastructure means, and we feel better equipped to advocate for it, then I feel like we've done something important this morning, and we can thank each other and our coffee for that. So without further ado, I'm going to give a super brief introduction to each of our speakers and then ask them to expand on that. Amy Stelly wears many hats, and one is that of Urban Conservancy board member, secretary, in fact. So I've had the good fortune of knowing about her work to stand up the Claiborne Avenue Alliance and move conversations forward on reimagining Claiborne Avenue without the overpass for the last few years. And we like to think of ourselves at the Urban Conservancy as her, particularly Sam, as her honorary press agent, since we receive a lot of the press inquiries she gets. So that's a fun window on her work as well. Elisa Speranza is most definitely the most knowledgeable water policy wonk I know, and in fact, probably one of the most knowledgeable water policy wonks out there anywhere. Everything I know about equitable stormwater management fees, I've either learned from her or from resources she's pointed me to. So thank you for that, Elisa. And Nicole and Greg Nixon are the co-owners of award-winning Ubuntu, Constructo-tech, and Urban Resilience. And they are one of the most popular residential green infrastructure installers among homeowners participating in our Front Yard initiative. And there are a lot of reasons that they are. So Elisa, Amy, Nicole, and Greg, thank you so much for sharing your time and thoughts this morning. I'd like to ask each of you to give us the 3-minute intro you wish I had given and tell us a little bit more about yourselves and your work. And then I'll ask you each a question to kick things off before we open it up for questions from everyone else. So Amy, do you want to kick us off with a brief intro?
Sure. My name is Amy Stelly. I'm a native New Orleanian, which we learn more and more each day counts for something here sometimes. I've lived near the Claiborne Avenue overpass really my whole life because even though I've worked in Florida, I never considered myself not a resident of the city, even though I voted in Florida. And that is because when I lived away, I was always home every 6 or 7 months, particularly when my parents were alive. So I've never really separated myself from the city. I never did like the overpass as a kid. I hated it. It was just ugly to me. And now all of the public health disparities that come with living near an overpass really drive me to want it removed because it is not a healthy environment for anyone, particularly people like the homeless who feel like they're forced to live under it. Or now on Claiborne, we have vendors. And I think entrepreneurship is a great thing, but you need to do it in a safe and clean environment. So those people, plus my own needs to get rid of it because I live near it and it's a menace, really drive me to do this work. So Dana, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it even more.
Sure, glad to have you tell us more. Let's see, Elisa, I guess your 3-minute intro.
Good morning, everyone. Well, unfortunately, I'm not a native of New Orleans, but I tell people I got here as fast as I could. And I have been living here for about almost 20 years now. I live in the Marigny. I'm an Urban Conservancy fangirl and Dana Ennis cheerleader. So anytime Dana asks me to do something, I do it. I'm also a new board member at Thrive New Orleans. So that's been an exciting development for me. I'm an independent consultant. I spent about 30-something years in the water, sewer, and drainage business, both from government and business standpoint, and also working with nonprofits during that time. And I currently serve on the as a mayoral appointee to the Infrastructure Advisory Board here, which is a quiet but hardworking group of people. I see our chairman, Paul Flower, on the line, overseeing the expenditure of the fair share money that those tourism taxes that are now dedicated to infrastructure in the city, in particular to water, sewer, and drainage infrastructure. So lots going on there that I can answer questions about. I was also on the task force that oversaw the examination of governance structures for the Sewage and Water Board a couple of years back, and there's a report that was out in the beginning of 2019 that was cited this week, in fact, in the City Council's resolution talking about consolidation of the city's drainage system. So some of you have probably seen that on the news. So looking forward to talking about all of that as we go forward. As Dana knows, I could talk about stormwater all day, so I'll try to be concise. Thank you.
We love that about you, Elisa. Greg and Nicole, would you like to give us an introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you for putting this on this morning. I want to apologize in advance. If you see any toddlers, they're probably going to come in here. We have 2. But yes, my name is Nicole Nixon. With my husband, Greg, we co-own Ubuntu, our 3rd baby. And we have been in business since 2019. We got our start with Thrive. So it's a wonderful organization and also, a great contributor to green infrastructure. But yeah, we've been doing stormwater management installations, anything from concrete removal, of course, to permeable pavers, infiltration trenches, bioretention facilities, all of these things that contribute to permeability, the ability of water to penetrate a surface and be stored. We're really all about, this third year in business, getting out into the community more and talking more about the education, doing more panels like this so people know the importance of green infrastructure, and love this topic about whether or not, green infrastructure is equitable. It is expensive, right? And things that are expensive tend to be sometimes centrally located in areas where they could be afforded. And so making sure that we are participating in such a way that a city like New Orleans, everybody can have access to this, because frankly, we're in a region that, we're only going to see water more and more. So our ability to deal with water, to combat, use water even as a positive resource for our region is super important. You want to add anything, Keith?
Yes, my name is Greg Nixon. Like Nicole said, we've been in business. I am a native of New Orleans. We moved, Nicole's from LA. We moved back, I moved back home after 10 plus years away. Was living in Los Angeles. I am a retired Olympic athlete, track and field, a 3-time world champion as well. And my goal was always to move back and have an impact in my city. And why not, Stormwater? I mean, since I was around, I can remember just storms and hurricanes and just rain events. And it got worse over the years. I never, growing up, not knowing anything about stormwater management, those terms wasn't around, especially green infrastructure. But it definitely interests me. I went to college for architecture, so design build has always been a passion of mine. So yeah, I'm happy that we are just a part of a movement, and we're in the early stages, and it's pretty cool to see us all come together to push this industry forward. And I think it's needed. The rest of the world is definitely a little bit ahead of us, but it's exciting that we're pushing faster and faster to push this movement and educate communities and officials and just all the stakeholders of the city. So yeah, we're excited to be a part of it.
Thank y'all. Appreciate that so much. I'm so excited to get this conversation started, just based on what you've all put on the table to start this off with. So I'm gonna kick this off with a question to each of you, and feel free to expand on what you have to say here, and cover things that may not be directly addressed by the question if you feel it's important. Amy, last fall, your work with the Claiborne overpass got on the Biden administration's radar. And since then, you've been featured in dozens, if not more, hundreds maybe, of news sources throughout the world, from the BBC to Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News, to NPR, to Nightline, and everything in between. Why so much interest now and how does what is happening in New Orleans fit into a wider national conversation about aging infrastructure whose construction, like the Claiborne overpass, disproportionately economically and socially harmed communities of color?
Well, thank you for the question, Dana. I want to go on record as saying Tucker Carlson skewered me, and he took my picture from the Urban Conservancy website and just broadcasted for the nation to see as he jabbed me with his little knife. But any event, I was very surprised, number one, that Claiborne was called out by the president. I had no idea anybody was really even looking at this work, because when you do freeway fighting, you are considered a nutcase. And I have heard that from just about everybody who talked to me about it prior to the president's call out, which I do appreciate. That call out actually did capture international attention. It's even been written about in China, which shocked me. You know, you see all the Chinese characters and then you see your name in English. It was quite surprising that this became a worldwide conversation. Sometimes I don't know why, but then other times I realize that Claiborne is a poster child for this movement. First of all, the highway system is aging. And even though, you know, people think that it's made of concrete, so it's going to last forever, and they cite, like, you know, buildings from Rome that are still standing, but those things are ruins. You know, so concrete doesn't last forever. And what we've seen in places like the building collapse in Florida is that you don't know what's going on inside with the steel. So, and on Claiborne, the steel is slowly but surely revealing itself. So if you walk the corridor and look up, particularly between Orleans and St. Bernard, you will see little rust spots of steel being exposed, and it's pervasive under there. So that tells me that we are at a point in the interstate's history, particularly in New Orleans, where we need to consider some sort of remedy for the age. And in our case, that would be removal. And I think repair, people talk about repair, you can't spackle concrete, and rebuilding would just really be devastating for the neighborhood. So I think when you look at the totality of Claiborne, you know, the beauty that it took away, the separation that it created amongst neighbors, it's not quite as evident on Claiborne Avenue because we still have some through streets. But when you go back into the 7th Ward behind Hunter's Field, it just creates a maze, a dark maze in the neighborhood. And I don't think anybody should have to live that way. It's not equitable because those of us who live near it certainly suffer from impairments that come from emissions and the toxicity. LSU did a great study for us, and they are measuring to this day noise pollution, air pollution, even we've partnered with Dr. Milky at Tulane to do things like measure legacy soil. And initially we thought that had washed away with Katrina because of the flooding and the topsoil. But Dr. Milky did some measurements for us about 3 weeks ago, and the levels of soil, lead in the soil in Lehman Playground, which abuts Claiborne, are really, really high. So he turned to me and said, "You've got to fix this," which is easier said than done. So there are a lot of reasons why New Orleans is on its radar. You know, we're a destination city, and to have devastation in a destination city makes the news. So I think everything that has come together has produced a gumbo for us that folks are really, really interested in. So the march to talk about equitable or inequitable infrastructure continues. I was fortunate enough last night to meet Christopher Coase, who is Pete Buttigieg's deputy, and he wants cities that are plagued by urban highways to keep talking, because he's assuring us now that the federal government is listening and they're interested in doing something about this problem. So New Orleans is a prime candidate. They really want to help us, but the issue in our city is that we all have to be on board, and not only the citizens, but that includes our local leaders. So that in many ways, as those of you who work in the city know, is a bigger battle than the interstate, because it has been taboo for so long. But we have to take the taboo away and really look at what it's doing to people. You know, the high cases of respiratory illness, the stress from noise pollution. I have an app on my phone, and the noise at night, which is when it's supposed to be quiet, is as high or higher than noise in an office building. And we know that offices can be noisy sometimes. You know, it's not deafening, but it's noisy. When you walk under the interstate, and I had the pleasure of working with Dana's son on that day when Dr. Milky was measuring lead, we measured noise that day also, and it was deafening. It was in the danger zones right under the interstate, and people operate under there. You know, I live in the neighborhood. I walk back and forth. The noise levels are literally dangerous on a calm day. So this is not a great environment that people have to live in. So I think when you put everything together, we become the poster child for what not to do to neighborhoods and where people shouldn't live. Dana, did I answer all of your questions?
That is awesome. Yes, and you also gave me an explanation for why if my son pretends like he can't hear what I'm saying, it's because he's deaf from his time under the overpass. So yeah, no, thanks. And we'll have a chance to talk more about this in a second. I should also mention, if Amy didn't, that she does live about a block from the overpass in the home her grandfather built, perhaps. Is that right?
He renovated. We're undoing that now.
Oh.
But no, the house is from 1910. So it predates my grandfather's foray into construction. He wasn't built for that. I can tell you Hurricane Ida undid everything that he put up in the house. But I have a great side gallery house from 1910. We just opened the side gallery, which means we have more noise in the house because the openings that were closed for all of my life, really. I discovered quite by accident that it's a side gallery house, but those openings, and they're huge, the gallery opens to 4 doors. So my house is really an inside outside house. So it brings the outside in, and opening the gallery is great, but again, it's more noise and more dirt. I have to tell you guys, this is unbelievable, but those of us who live near the interstate, the emissions stick to the house. They also stick to everything inside. I don't live with air conditioning, so I open my windows and you can see evidence of the emissions on things like jewelry, because it's not only tarnished, it's jet black, where I had a jewelry box that was really close to the window in my bedroom. I dropped one earring, couldn't find it for a couple of months because it was shoved really deep into a corner behind the jewelry box, but its mate was inside. So when I found the lost one, it was jet black when the one inside the box was only slightly tarnished. So that gives you an idea of the emissions that stick to the environment. And we do have to, now clean our houses with pressure washers and it doesn't even come crystal clean. It just takes off the surface dirt because it's embedded from so many years of exposure. So if you would imagine what that's doing to your lungs, your skin, everything, then you would want it to go away. It's not pleasant.
Thank you so much for that. Greg and Nicole, as co-owners of a family, well, I'm going a little out of order, but that's okay. Greg and Nicole, I'll go to you. As co-owners of a family firm, you're seeking opportunities to grow Ubuntu at every turn. And you were recently DBE certified to qualify you to go after more city, state, and federal contracts. When in your intro, you were talking a little bit about access and the importance of making green infrastructure accessible and affordable to recipients, to people who need that kind of intervention. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about also access to the opportunities for construction firms such as yours. Can you explain some of the structural inequities you've run up against in the procurement process, including how DBE certification is a double-edged sword?
Absolutely. So fantastic question, and a great observation. Not only is there this aspect of making sure that homeowners and residents of the city have access to green infrastructure, it's also important with the millions upon millions of dollars that's entering the economy, specifically dealing with green infrastructure and stormwater management, that, you know, many businesses get the opportunity to participate in that service and providing that service to the city. So in our journey, like you said, Dana, we just recently in 2021 became certified through DBE as a requirement for our, we became a prime contractor for NORA's CAP Round 2 community adaptation program. It's a part of about $5-6 million that was allocated to Gentilly for residents in Gentilly to have access to green infrastructure. So we became we served with Thrive as a subcontractor in 2020, and then in 2021, we ourselves became a prime contractor, and as a part of the requirement, we having DBEs participate in that work. So a little, very small, I'll try to be short. I drug my feet. We talked a lot about becoming DBE certified even before we were, eventually, required to do it, just because of the word disadvantage. It's not that we don't identify and don't understand, but it's just like, gosh, why do we have to label ourselves disadvantaged? So I feel like that's almost the first hurdle, depending on who you are as a business owner and what you think of it. You're almost like, gosh, you're working so hard. We're trying to be trusted contractors. We're trying to be excellent at what we do. We want to be masters of our installations. We're trying to grow up a team that really understands how to provide the service, and we're all winning together. And then it's like, and then we have to be disadvantaged. That's really tough. Just not even applying yet, just overcoming that. Honestly, sometimes it's like, what are we saying about being disadvantaged? So, you go through the process, and you actually, because the process is pretty extensive, you feel accomplished once you're done. You're like, all right, I got it. Let's get on the brass and get to work, right? In that, we talked a lot about, okay, what does it look like for Ubuntu, our company, to really utilize the DBE for growth? Maybe I shouldn't be so pessimistic, right? I should, just understand that this is an opportunity. We don't have to lead with it. We don't have to lead like, hi, I'm a DBE and can I have a job? It's like, we're focused on being excellent. We're focused on our company first and being a great option. And oh, by the way, this, DBE is also an opportunity for us to participate in other contracts around the city. So we started talking to people, other folks, one in particular who's been, certified since 2006, and what, their experience has been like. We also had the opportunity through Dana to talk to people who served as prime contractors. What do they expect from DBEs? We really are trying to study, because we just were recently certified, like, what does it look like? What does it mean to participate? And quite frankly, it's been pretty frustrating. And, the frustration lies in a couple of things. One, so the BRASS system is the way to find out about opportunity. This is where prime contractors go and they, put the job up through the BRASS and let DBEs know, like, this is happening. You can, put a bid in for this project. What we're finding out is that by the time it's on the BRASS, there's a good chance they may already know, and I know maybe we're not supposed to say that, but they may already know who's going to get that job. And from what we're getting back from other people, friends, and other owners of businesses, they're feeling like they don't really get a whole lot of opportunity. They get opportunities from everything, but it's not a significant part of their business to get opportunities through the DBE. So it kind of matches up that it's like, we're hearing that a lot of times prime contractors already know who they want by the time it's put on, the BRASS. And then from people who are already participating and been participating for many years, they're experiencing that they're not getting the jobs. So this is not particular to everyone. Of course, somebody's getting jobs, and the other thing is we're speaking about green infrastructure. And, I don't know if it's different for other industries that are on the DBE. Maybe there's a little bit more participation and they feel a little bit more connected. But we've found that, it's probably the case for a lot of industries. And even with recent articles coming out, meetings that are happening with city council, there was a recent article that came out about expanding the minority contracting program, meaning the DBE, and trying to have more of this mentorship thing. Sorry, my son is in the background. I don't know how much you can hear. Trying to increase that program to more business owners, and that's a whole nother conversation. But it really outlines a lot of the challenges, and there definitely needs more restructuring. But for the most part, it seems like the DBE system, that program, is not quite working like it should in terms of getting access to businesses that would like to participate. Want to add anything else to that?
No, I think you said it. Yeah, I know you said a lot. I mean, for me, in my opinion, I think it's an outdated system. And like we all know, what systems definitely was designed for a purpose and a reason. And I think on paper, it sounds really good. And I come from an athletic background. So when you think about putting a team together, and on paper, it seems really good. And then actually it's time to play the game. It's like everything is falling apart. No one can really play together. And I feel like that's how the DB system is. It sounds really good on paper, but when it comes to actuality, I think it has a lot of disadvantages in the system, and it's just outdated. And like we speaking on green infrastructure, it's an emerging, growing industry, and it sucks for us that this growing, emerging industry has to go through this pipeline of an outdated system. And we once again, we understand why it was in place, but some of the questions that we come up with is the continuation of trying to change within inside of a outdated and a broken system, and why not question, what can we do to build? I know this is a national thing, so changing the DBE is just not New Orleans. This is a national. Everyone has a DBE system in place, but we know for sure, just from feedback and our short experience with it, that it's broken. And for us being a part of this new industry, stormwater management, green infrastructure, to be dragged through that same system, for us, it's just, why. So yeah, I mean, I think you said it all. I think for me, it's outdated. It's an old aging. I mean, we have too much going on in 2022. It's technology, it's innovation, and to continue to tie ourselves back into an old, outdated system.
Thanks, Greg and Nicole. That's great. I want to just point out before I move on to Elisa that there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the chat. In fact, Erica Zucker has a comment directed to you, Greg and Nicole. And then there's more information about opportunities, ways that you can connect to things, to Amy's work. There's an upcoming community conversation, April 2nd. There's a link to register there in the chat, and more information from Dr. Katner at LSU on the Claiborne Avenue Alliance, the website link there. So lots of good stuff. I don't think you want to miss anything there. So, so Elisa, another conversation that is picking up steam locally is around stormwater management and financing stormwater management through an equitable fee structure. Why is a stormwater management fee important, and what would an equitable structure look like?
Thanks. Before I answer the question, I just want to say, first of all, I have nothing but respect for the work that Amy is doing, and also for what Greg and Nicole are doing. My dad was a self-employed concrete mason and bricklayer, and I know if he was alive today, we'd have him down here taking out that concrete, but but I know how hard it is to run a family business, having grown up in one, and what you guys are doing is very important. I also worked for a prime contractor and consultant for a lot of my career here in New Orleans, and I feel your pain. I think that even the prime contractors who are trying to participate in the DBE system from the other side would probably agree with you. And I'm glad to see some conversation in the chat about, okay, what can we do to fix it? So good for you. Thank you for bringing that up. On stormwater, so there are a couple of topics that are relevant to equity. There's a lot we could talk about on stormwater and drainage management and all kinds of other things in the city, but the three that I'll focus on is in the realm of equity. Greg said it earlier that the rest of the world is ahead of us, and that's true on a lot of things. You know, we know that we're special here in New Orleans, but we are not necessarily unique in terms of what the challenges that we're dealing with. Some of them are just bigger and more existential for us. But Greg's right, there are 1,800 plus stormwater utilities throughout the United States. Most cities, even very small cities, have a stormwater utility in place, which is there to help finance and run adequate drainage for the city, whether they're in the west or the east, if they've got too much rain or not enough rain, or in some places in the west where all the rain comes at once, and that's a problem. So different challenges in different geographies, but the way of financing stormwater improvements and maintenance is pretty well established around the country. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Our basic problem is a couple of things. We don't have enough money, as usual, and we don't have a consolidated way of managing the system. It's split between the city and the Sewage and Water Board. I won't go into that because that's another whole rabbit hole, unless people want to. But the real problem, bottom line, is that 43% of the property owners in the city do not pay property taxes because they are nonprofits, because they are churches or universities or nonprofits in some other way. They're exempt from property tax, which means that they don't pay into the millage that funds the stormwater system. So the water and sewer system is funded out of rates. So you pay for what you use, basically. On the stormwater side, if you're a nonprofit, you don't pay for what you use. Your parking lots and your drainage from your property go into the stormwater system, into the drainage system, but you don't pay for that. And I know we have some of our nonprofit institutions on the call today, and I know that some of the Loyola and Tulane and some of the other nonprofit institutions in the city who are so important to our community are also doing a lot right now on green infrastructure and trying to mitigate the drainage. But a stormwater fee, an equitable stormwater fee, if we had one, would also make sure that the burden isn't falling unfairly on property owners, mostly residential property owners and commercial property owners who are paying property tax. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the bottom line there. The other two aspects of it that other cities have tackled and done well is if you had an adequate stormwater fee that charged people for what they use, the more you pave, the more you pay, is kind of what they say. So if you had green infrastructure replacing pavement, for example, most cities would give you a credit on the stormwater fee, so that you would get consideration for the work that you put in, for the investment that you put in, and your stormwater bill would be less. Also, they have built in affordability considerations, acknowledging that not, as Nicole said, this is expensive and not everybody has the money to do it. So there are all kinds of ways to address affordability. The U.S., there's some national resources people can look into. The U.S. Water Alliance and Water Now Alliance have done work on equity in water and stormwater. The Water Collaborative here locally has done a great job working on these issues. There's a white paper from a few years ago. I think there's a couple of the authors of that white paper on the call today, talking about all these issues and why it's important to address. And what I'm seeing now in the work that I'm doing with the Infrastructure Advisory Board in others is there's a real coming together from the business community, from the grassroots community, from the equity advocacy community, from certainly the Urban Conservancy has done a ton of work on this as well. Thrive has done a lot of work. There's a real moment here we have in the city to finally address this situation, both the underfunding in general and the inequity of the way that stormwater is funded and managed in the city.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, look at the time. We're just like right on the spot. I want to remind people who may have come in after we opened that all of our presenters have agreed to stay beyond 9 if we have questions that continue after that point until 9:15. So, but we also understand that if you have to go, you have to go. So if you have questions for the presenters, it might be best if you use the raise hand function in reactions, but feel free to do that at this time.
And thanks for mentioning the BGR report too, Dana, in the chat.
Yeah, I guess
Another great resource.
it is 5 years old, I realize, but it's still very, very, it's a great start. Things have changed, but there's a lot there that really gives a good overview. Would you agree? Is there anything?
I would agree. I think the difference between then and now is we have, and this may get me some tomatoes thrown at me, but we have incredibly well-qualified, competent, stable, and hardworking folks working at the Sewage and Water Board under the leadership of Gaston Corbin, who has brought in, and not to disparage what happened before and the folks that were working hard then too, but now we have more resources and help at the Sewage and Water Board and folks that have been brought in to manage some very long-standing, decades-long problems there that we're all very familiar with. And you don't read about it every day, but being as close to it as I am, I see a ton of progress there. And I'm very, very encouraged by their ability to manage not just the drainage issue, but a lot of the other problems that are on their plate. So that's the big difference between 2017 and now on the BGR report.
Excellent, thanks. And if I don't see any hands raised yet, so if there's not a question out there, I have one for you, Elisa. What is the press release recently from Helena Moreno regarding bringing the ending the split between the DPW and the Sewage and Water Board? Can you explain a little bit about what that means in the context of this conversation?
Yeah, you know, as most people on this call probably know, that the drainage system is split in New Orleans. Sewage and Water Board owns all the big pipes, and the city owns all the small pipes, to keep it simple, in the catch basins. So whenever you have split responsibility like that in any kind of infrastructure or city function, inevitably there's going to be gaps in service and the way that people are managing that. Also, the funding is, the funding goes into the millage, it goes into the city. There's a lot of convoluted ways that the drainage system is both funded and managed from an operations and maintenance and a capital investment standpoint. So back in 2018, the task force that I sat on then looked at that problem, brought in experts from around the country to educate us about what would good look like, what would it look like to do it the right way. And we recommended at that time, and in fact, it was cited in the press release, that the drainage system should be consolidated under one entity. Now, and we looked at different ways of doing that. You could create a separate stormwater utility that has its own problems, and you're creating a whole separate bureaucracy and it gets expensive. It could be consolidated under the city, or could be consolidated under the Sewage and Water Board. Some people even talked about putting it under, some sort of a regional entity, like the Flood Protection Agency. But at the end of the day, our task force recommended that it be consolidated under the Sewage and Water Board. I think the Sewage and Water Board is working hard to rebuild public trust. At the time, that was kind of a stretch. But that was our recommendation. And they have the infrastructure, the management infrastructure to put that together. We'd need a lot of work in order to kind of get down to the details of how that would happen. What about, where do the workers go? How does it actually physically happen? But at the same time, putting that funding mechanism into place is very important. We also talked about maybe it makes sense to get the funding mechanism in place first, so that we're not trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, so that it's you're dealing with a well-funded system that is accountable to the public, that is equitable, and that is incentivizing green infrastructure and best practices in drainage management for the city. That's, I think, what we're all aiming for. How you get there is going to be, I think, a conversation in the city.
Thank you. And I think Erica Zucker asked a question that Greg and Nicole would like to answer publicly. So that's, she said she helped write and promote the city's contractor responsibility ordinance, and would love to talk to them about the challenges and how we can address them as they develop regulations for the ordinance, and to make sure that the city contracting is done in the most equitable ways for both contractors and workers. And she was asking how the system is broken and outdated.
Well, excuse me, Erica, thank you for your work. It's definitely needed to continue understanding what is broken about the DBE system. Like we said a little earlier, we were recently certified. And we know personally people who could expand upon this with much more experience and depth than we have. But we can certainly answer your question, even with the experience, the little bit of time we've spent. So first, I wanted to say that, what's interesting about the DBE is the different perspectives, first and foremost. So you have business owners that are a part of the DBE. And even within that, it seems like there's like a split of honestly, Black business owners and other people that are part of the DBE that, they have their experience. So you have the owners who are part of the DBE, then you have the city, and then you have prime contractors. And at least this is how I'm seeing it. There's at least 3 different perspectives on whether the DBE, whether it's working or not. And, one of the things that I asked, even, prime contractor, was, is the DBE system, in your opinion, like a burden? Like, do you feel like, you have to call all of these, there was a project, we literally got about 3 or 4 calls a day to respond to a bid for about 3 or 4 days straight, like saying, hello, this bid is out. Hello, you're gonna put your bid in. Like, I had 3 or 4, I'm not lying, 3 or 4 messages on my phone, like insisting to get, to put in a bid or respond whether or not we were going to, put in a bid. And, ultimately, Greg actually went to one of the meetings for that bid, and nobody showed up but Greg, I'm just like, wow, okay. And it just caused me to just have a whole lot of questions about just, okay, our experience. Then, I'm thinking about us, because we have served as a prime. And since we became one, we fulfilled the since we became a DB, we fulfilled the requirement without having to go out and search, for subcontractors to participate. So we didn't have the experience of going out and finding and calling and things like that. So it just caused me to think a lot of things. So I'm interested in your perspective. It sounds like you work for the city, or you had some time with that, and seeing what your perspective would be. In response to your question, how is it dated? Number one, in our opinion, anything that you've done for decades and it's the same system in general, and you're not getting the result that is needed, it's now dated, right? It's like you have these businesses that are wanting to participate, or you're trying to get more participation and it's not quite happening. The other thing I think about when something is dated is like, okay, are the same players playing in the game? Like, we're an athletic family. So are the same players playing in the game? Are you getting new talent? How are you getting new talent? that seems like it's falling short with the DBE as it is. Us being brand new, not knowing a whole lot, we're like, okay, we can put our bid in for a project. They may already know who they want to work for anyway. Do they know us? How do they know Ubuntu, our company, as a talented choice in this green infrastructure? So this is why we're going out and trying to meet people, and we don't want anything given to us. I want to make sure that is said. We want to work for ours. We don't want, oh, here, DBE, here you go. No, that's not it. But it's just like within this program, how do we build relationships? How do they know us? How can they understand they can trust us? How do they know, how do we express that to them? And especially sometimes when, not sometimes, a lot of times, it's an invitation to bid, which is based off of the lowest bid. I feel like that versus an RFP where you have to promote yourself and why you're the best for the job versus just being the least expensive. Sometimes to me is a little bit like, are you trying to, how do they know who, if ultimately you're going to pick based on a price, are you even considering the company? It just causes us to ask these questions. So I don't know if that answers the question or raises more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think also, like Nicole said, just being outdated, getting results. It's not a secret, you can do a survey on DBEs and their partaking in opportunity. But another thing is just having an opportunity to grow other leaders. I believe, I don't quote me, but I believe it was around 800 DBEs, and I think only 2 companies was able to become primes. This city, we're not going to progress until we're able to raise other leaders. One thing we always preach about is being able to, this new word that's been around, but it's now coming out. The mayor mentioned it's called defunding. And that's how we were able to be a part of the CAP, where we take, a $10 million project and maybe 5 companies are able to take that and break it. And we are now being able to be our own leader and grow and be a part of it, getting the experience, building our resume. Nothing is ever going to grow unless we have other leaders. We can't continue for the last 70 years. You got 5 primes that just kind of been in position. We can't do that for the next 70 years, next 100 years, but we got the same 5, or every couple of years we may add another prime in there that get the work, and then now they're looking for DBEs. Now I know not everybody is going to be in a position to build a DBE, but just being able, we got to think long-term and globally about the progression of the city. And to continue this process, I don't see how we can catch up with the rest of the nation, and better yet, the world, by continuing to have 4 to 5, 6 major players. To move the city forward, we need everyone to become a leader, everyone to think like a leader, everyone to have opportunity to be a leader. And it takes time. Like I said, we're not looking to get a handout. We've been doing this work for 3 years. Now we know we're a leader because the work we put in behind the scene, what we do, we research, studying, talking to other cities. That's what we do. But, we know that if you're given an opportunity, you can take that and grow and become a leader and be able to impact the city. We need more leaders, and I feel the DBE is not creating more leaders.
Thank you so much for that. We're at 8:58, and I want to give Amy the last couple minutes before our official close down time to give a plug for her April 2nd event. And then I just want to put a word in, just kind of a save the date, April 22nd. We will be having a green sector meetup that Urban Conservancy is hosting, that we hope you can join us at the Happy Raptor for that, 4 to 7 p.m. Watch for all of our channels for more information about that as we get closer to it. But Amy, close us out for this part with some information about April 2nd and how people can get involved and why.
Okay, if I could share my screen, I'll put the flyer up and tell you what's going on. Oh. Let's see. I don't know, it's not allowing me to share. So I'll just say,
I just made you co-host, so you might be able to share now.
no, it's not.
I'll share my
really-
screen.
Oh, okay. So, do you have the flyer up? Well, while Sam is looking, we're having a community meeting on April 2nd. We're going to start with coffee at 9 and then keynotes at 9:30 and noon. Our first keynote is going to be Representative Royce Duplessis. And we're going to give an overview of what's going on in New Orleans. I feel like our community doesn't really know about all of these different projects that are going on. The RTA has things going on. The port has things going on. They're doing an expansion. We're just going to talk about their project, but there will be representatives from the RTA, Wagner and Ball. Thank you, Sam. There are links there, and I will post the flyer on the Claiborne Avenue Alliance website that actually will have a QR code where you can just go to the Eventbrite. But we're going to give a big picture, and then at noon, we're going to switch gears, and Congressman Troy Carter will give our lunchtime keynote. Lunch is free. It's on the Alliance. And we're going to talk about looking forward in New Orleans, things like housing, green infrastructure, everything that it takes to make the city run. So I would appreciate if you guys would come and join us. We have room for 150 people at the Treme Market Branch, which is at 800 North Claiborne Avenue. It's a beautiful facility. I consider it the home of the Alliance. So it's a building, it's a beautiful historic building that's very near and dear to my heart. But our goal is to actually get community input and begin the conversation about reimagining Claiborne. We all know that Claiborne Avenue is really the spine of the city. It runs from parish line to parish line. And you know that when your back is hurting, a piece of your spine is in disrepair, then your whole body is crippled. So I think we have to fix that piece of our spine that is in disrepair, meaning the I-10 corridor, because it just devastated the city, not only socially, but economically and environmentally, which is a big thing. So we need to talk about what we're going to do with the avenue looking forward. So we're looking for community input because this is the time to start the conversation. So I would really encourage everyone to come. We're going to have community tables where you will be prompted with certain questions and you can just really just say whatever's on your mind. And our goal as a team, which includes the RTA, Wagner and Ball, the port is at the table. They just don't care to appear at this particular meeting. But we want to take all of your feedback and then begin to create a plan looking forward. And this is a regional conversation. So things like not having a plan for New Orleans East, that impacts Claiborne because everybody who lives in New Orleans East is forced to drive into the downtown core for work and all kinds of other stuff. So there are a lot of problems in the city that we need to fix. And even though folks don't associate some of the ills in the city with Claiborne, I can tell you again, when your back is broken, then the whole body is in disrepair. So please come and join us. We look forward to your input. We're not looking for anyone to take a position pro or con on removal, even though my position is very well stated. But we just want to hear from you because we think it's time for everyone to say what they have to say. And hopefully through these conversations, and I'm really happy that we're getting state and federal support to move these conversations. We certainly hope to prompt the city so that we can have much more of a local conversation about what the vision for not only Claiborne, but the city should be. So looking forward to it and hope to see you guys there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to see in the chat, there are several opportunities to keep this conversation going. This is not a one and done. I say Nellie Katzen with CBNO has something scheduled coming up and invites everyone. Erica also has an event on April 22nd, all around the same idea about not only like what equitable and inequitable infrastructure, but really looking at the nuts and bolts of what has to happen and what needs to change, including that all important access to capital piece of it, the funding piece of it for all of the above. So thank you. And if people have to jump off, we totally understand. If you can stick around and you have a few more questions, we're here for you. So am I forgetting anything with that? All right. Any questions? Riley, I see that you posted something. Oh, she had to jump off, but I guess she's just saying thank you. So, and she said she would like to invite anyone on this call to join in on the conversation that they are having as well. So that's another, she put her email in there. So, well, if there are no other questions, we'll let you get to your very busy days ahead. And thank you again for participating.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Everybody.